Hello everybody and welcome to today's review of Jeanne du Barry. It is the new film written, directed, and starring Maïwenn, also co-starring Johnny Depp. The last movie I saw Johnny Depp in was probably Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. And even though I was not a fan of the movie or the franchise per se, I still thought that Johnny Depp was one of the highlights of that series. Not only that, Johnny Depp has been one of my favorite actors working in the film industry since Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl. And it's unfortunate that we haven't seen him in anything new for the last couple of years, for obvious reasons. But I'm not going to talk about that. I'm only going to talk about this movie. Jeanne du Barry is a historical drama that takes place in France during the 1700s, and it explores the life of Jeanne Bécu and her relationship with King Louis XV. I can see why someone would choose to make a film about this particular person because this person is very interesting. In the film, Maïwenn plays Jeanne, a woman who comes from a working class family who doesn't have a lot of prospects, so she chooses a life of harlotry to get by. She's an avid reader who never wants to deprive herself of any knowledge or pleasures. So it was very interesting seeing a woman of her class work her way up the ladder of the French court, not as a lady, but as a courtesan. And for those of you who don't know what a courtesan is, it's basically a high-end prostitute who is kept by a very wealthy person. And in this case, that happens to be the King of France, played by Johnny Depp. When Jeanne is called to the French court at Versailles, the two of them strike a relationship which then blossoms into a romance, which then causes a bit of a scandal within the royal palace. And when Jeanne becomes the new favorite of the king, this rubs people the wrong way, and they become so jealous that they try to do whatever they can to get her kicked out of the palace. So here's what I liked about the film. Obviously, the relationship at the center of the movie between Jeanne and Louis is very fascinating. These are two very contrasting people who come from very different backgrounds, and you can totally tell why they fall in love. It's one of those classic stories where opposites attract. Louis is brought up in a certain way, and he has to conduct himself in a manner that is becoming of a king. And there are protocols that he and the other members of the court have to abide by. Now, when Jeanne is brought to the palace, she understands what the rules are, but she doesn't follow them, not out of disobedience or disrespect, but because she feels like she cannot be herself when she is acting that way. And this was probably very refreshing to the king's eyes. Here is this creature who is genuine, who is not afraid to be herself while everybody else around him is putting on a show. And aside from the fact that the king does keep other women to the side, they seemed very devoted to each other, and overall I'd say that this was a pretty healthy relationship. And we also get a good look at what life at Versailles is really like, and we get to see all of this from Jeanne's perspective. What's so ironic is that Jeanne observes a lot of absurdities going on within that palace. So many people act so ridiculous with one another, and yet Jeanne is the one who is ostracized not just because of her class, but because of her personality. And what was also very fascinating was that this film shows you how people achieved a lot of power in those days. And once they've got that power, you see what that does to their mindset. Once they've achieved so much influence, they seem to get it in their mind that they are the sole authority of what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. And when someone comes along who challenges that notion, they do whatever they can to make sure that other people think the same way as they do. And one of the greatest weapons that human beings have in any social situation is the threat of isolation. We are social creatures by nature, and so when we get a ton of people on our side, we want to keep them at our side, and that is what we see being played out in this film. And it is so frustrating because you do want to see this man and this woman thrive in their relationship, and there are those who don't want it that way simply because they are losing their power and influence within the palace. And it is so trivial, but that's the way it was, and that's the way it is to this day. And the film does an excellent job exploring this kind of conflict. However, the film is not without its faults. It's shot nicely, the costumes are very lavish without being too flashy, and the film is shot at Versailles, which gave the film a lot of authenticity. But at a certain point, the film stopped being such an immersive experience and just became a visual presentation of what happened in the past. And what's also at fault is that it became less personal. Every actor in this film does a good job. I did not see a false note anywhere. However, because of the way the script was written, I didn't get a good enough sense of who they were as people. Yes, I understood who they were by their positions and by their background, but the film doesn't dig deep enough to explore what they were like as people in general. And without giving too much away, something happens at the end of the film that was probably intended for us to feel emotionally devastated, and this was right before the French Revolution. So if you know your history, you know. But I just couldn't feel that way at all. I don't know. So I didn't feel like I was a part of what happened. I was just being shown what had happened. But I cannot say that this was a bad film per se. I love learning about history, which is why I enjoy films like this. I still enjoyed myself while watching this film because even though it didn't give me quite everything that I look for in a historical drama, it still has a lot of redeeming qualities. The production quality is very good, the performances are excellent, and I personally appreciated the story. It's about a character who is thrust into a world where nobody understands her, but she still manages to stay true to herself. It's a good history lesson, and I'm glad this movie was made. So I'm gonna give Jeanne du Barry a B+. Thank you for watching my video, ladies and gentlemen. I hope to see you again next time.